Guys, I want to talk about this idea of workfare. People on unemployment having to, work for some kind of salary. I've been looking at the origins of this, and it's actually the first sort of like major program I can find of this is actually with Adolf Hitler in the 1930s, the late 1920s. Actually, when he got into even before he got into power, when he became chancellor in the late 1920s, he was doing this to build up membership of the brown shirts or the SA. I've been reading this book by Lewis Hagen called Ein Volk, Ein Reich, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's about the history of ordinary people during the Third Reich, not just not a history lesson as such, but like interviews with people who lived through the period. And the striking thing for me was how the actual workfare system was used to recruit members of the brown shirts of the SA. Now, what happened was they was going into there was huge unemployment in the Weimar Republic at the time, and there was massive chaos. There was various attempts to run a sort of a Soviet that almost happened in Bavaria and a few other places. There was a lot of the people who made up the brown shirts initially were unemployed returned servicemen, and a lot of them were involved in things like the merchant navy. They got back home and they had no money and there was no jobs, but there was a kind of an unemployment benefit. It was kind of like a dole of the day, and they used to get this sort of like this allowance to just basically stop from starvation down at the labor exchange when they'd go down looking for a job, and it was very little. Well, the brown shorts originally was an idea to supplement their income and give them clothing as well as meals. They would have cafes, and all you had to do was basically do what the brown shirts did. Now, what the brown shirts did back then was basically fight communists. Now, the communists were a pretty nasty bunch too. Actually, in many ways, they're worse. They were actually killing brown shirts, and the brown shirts were told not to kill anybody because, well, they're told not to carry guns. They could just fight with their fists. But this is what the Workfare program created. They created the brown shirts. The brown shirts were this sort of paramilitary wing of the National Socialist, well, what they were called at the time, National Socialist Workers' Party. And that was the idea. They would get a supplement on top of their unemployment benefit. And from this, as long as they supported Hitler and the Third Reich, they continued to receive the unemployment benefit, the supplement on top of the unemployment benefit, as well as the clothing, because there was a shortage of clothes. Like, you don't think about this at the time, but before the time of like cheap clothing, there was even like a shortage of clothes. There was like problems with obtaining, just thing to live. So a brown shirt, a uniform was actually clothing. They got boots and things like that for the winter. So here you had a bunch of people who were paid by a government or political organization, and then you bought their loyalty. And when you had their loyalty, you could do anything because they associate their basic economic survival with government handouts. And here we go with the workfare again. When your government gives you workfare, what they're really doing is diminishing your social welfare allowance in order to make you work for the rest. And working for the rest creates an element of survival and dependency upon the government. And in many people, this will be translated into fanaticism. Whatever the government wants, I will give it to them as long as they don't cut off my allowance and my supplemental benefit on top of that. This is the real clincher. This is what really buys people off. So a very good book. I would suggest this, Ein Volk, Ein Reich by Lewis Hagen. A brilliant read. A very sobering read because a lot of sort of the problems we have today, I see them. They really were existing in the 1930s. And the radicalization both on the left and the right, although it was really all on the left, it was just like the left kind of changed and became a kind of, when people say the Nazis were right wing, they weren't really, they were socialists. They had a completely socialist program and everything. And they did things like close down supermarkets and department stores in order to keep the trade going to smaller businesses. And it was little things like this, little populist things like this that won them support. Not those other aspects too. I'm going to talk about that later. But small populist things like this is what wins fanatical support. And this is why we're getting these kinds of things pushed back on us again. Your government gave you a job. It gave you a supplemental benefit on top of that. Therefore, you owe them. And if it's taken away, you won't be able to do anything about it. But if you remain loyal and especially become fanatical, you will move up the ranks. So remember that the next time politicians are talking about workfare. It really has its origins with the Nazis in the 1930s and the creation of the brown shirts.